So one of the things that is quite a strong thing for Sims itself, because I remember being there, is having these FM agreements. So it basically protects Sims, and also protects some of the local authorities as well. And one of the things I've always been, I suppose, for the last year or so, because I think there's some good things about the FM agreement. Like I say, it basically protects the local authority. The local authorities feel that then they can build their teams. They can basically then deliver their services without feeling threatened of losing some of their schools, unless they go to academies, of course.
Yeah.
The only thing is, I think there's, and I hope friends and colleagues out there don't dislike me for saying this. The trouble is, I think the market's changed.
Yeah.
And actually, I think those FM agreements are still sort of relevant, but the trouble is that there's already teams that are basically going into those authorities and looking after some of the academies, as an example. Yeah. And which is reducing down the amount of money that the local authority has, and because they can't expand because they're tied to the FM agreement, which means all they're doing is giving a reduced service, and it's not their fault. It's just basically to do with economics. Ultimately, if you can't get the money in, how can you basically expand your team or deliver other services? There's also the element, I think, with Sims. Maybe it's not the right time, but when Sims 8 comes out, it could potentially be a barrier, because if you have teams which are so small, then why would they want to roll out Sims 8? So, it'd be interesting to get your view on. And I'm assuming you probably would say, well, I'm not a big fan of the FM agreement. That's what I'm assuming you're going to say. But what reasons would you give if you were going to talk to Sims, as an example, about what would you do differently?
Two things that are very topical with Capita are the accreditation and the FM agreement. And the FM agreement was a piece of genius from Capita when you think about it. And coming from a commercial background, I understood it straight away. It's a ring fence. It's a discount to schools for the local authority. I understood that. The world was different then. The world was different. And SBS and Schools ICT and our other colleagues in the MIS privately owned company world, we had to fight against that. And you could never get a local authority to give you the FM agreement. So for example, if I wanted to provide services in Nottingham, I had to get the council to agree that I could be on their FM agreement, so I could operate at the same price. Now, you think they're likely to do that if they've got their own Sims team? So the only way we could operate was in non-Sims authorities, or where authority had Sims but didn't have a Sims team. So the academy market changed all of that, obviously, and as you say, it's gradually. So I think the market is now gradually eroding the value of the FM agreement, and it will become probably. And there's still some really good Sims authorities out there, don't get me wrong, but it's going to become more and more difficult. And if academies take off again and it starts converting, then they're going to have to change themselves, and the FM agreement won't mean anything.
I think there's also, if you go back to the academy market, that because of the FM agreement and the discounts that basically local authorities got, that means actually it puts Sims at a disadvantage when it comes to pricing at an academy level, because the Sims direct pricing is way too expensive.
Exactly. FMS as a standalone product is a brilliant finance system. I don't know how old it is, but it's very, very good, and it still works. Old. And they were getting it, and we worked out that schools were actually paying around £300 for it. Now, how do you compete against that if you're a competitor? So it did have
most optimistic in the maintain sector is about between 50 and 300.
Really?
Yeah.
The market is changing the dynamics, isn't it, in terms of how it's all set up, and I think Capita or the new owners have got a bit of work to do on that, but I don't think they will change it themselves. I think the market will probably change it for them.
Yeah. I think it depends on what they want to try and achieve. I think if they want to look at these challenges and see them as a threat, then they really are going to have to start thinking about how they restructure at least the Sims direct pricing. I think they're going to have to bring that down to, which then takes away the FM agreement anyway, really. If you start bringing it down to the sort of same pricing as the maintain sector, then that would ultimately make the FM agreement null and void in some ways.
The one thing I do want to say about the accreditation process, I mean,
Hmm.
Viv will probably not believe what I'm saying, but it is the most, it is the most, it's the most arduous accreditation that we've gone through as a company in our history. It's the most valuable. It really puts you under the microscope to know what you're doing, and I value it because it shows how good we are to get that accreditation as a private company. Now,
Hmm.
I'm not saying that local authorities would get it a bit easier than us. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying as a private company, you have to have everything in place, and they really, it's an Ofsted, it's an internal Ofsted for a private company, and you know, raising the standards of the professional services is I'm all for
Yeah.
in this market. I think companies that operate and provide services to schools should be made to have accreditations of this kind, and the Capita one is probably the best that we've ever gone through. And it, you know, when you get through it, everyone breathes a sigh of relief, and we go down the pub and celebrate because it's hard work and
Yeah.
it's really satisfying to get it. So that's the one thing one of the things I've really valued from the Capita partnership.
What do you think? So, here's an idea for you and a question. So, hopefully, I'm not leading the jury. But ultimately, you know, if you look at the accreditation and you assume, well, let's face it, Capita Sims or anybody else who gets a big market share as they have can't support all schools. One of the reasons why, you know, they went out to, you know, they've got 140 odd local authorities, and there's a whole number of commercial support units basically delivering the services in. And actually, I'm quite a big fan of regional sort of support as well, because I think, you know, it means that it's somebody you can relate to, and if need be, they come in.
Yeah.
But but would you ever go as far as going for not just accreditation, but centres of excellence? So rather than Capita Sims ever delivering any form of support, apart from obviously, you know, first, second, and third tier support, which, you know, obviously supports you guys, but rather than supporting schools, they basically go, here's our X number of centres of excellence. So SPS is one of our centres of excellence. So we recommend you schools around this area go to here rather than come to us.
I think you know my answer to that.
Like I say, I'm leading the jury. I wasn't trying to.
The last conversation I had with Capita was around that. It was, let's raise the bar for standards of MIS providers, because I think they had around 30, 40 providers that were accredited. And I'm saying, how many of these are, you know, can really truly do the job? And why don't we have a platinum accreditation where you go the extra level? Because then everyone's got this trust then that, you know, it's about quality of service at the end of the day, and giving these schools proper quality training so that they can do their jobs.
Yeah. And I also think, you know, you could easily see, so I could easily see, and I think I've probably said it in other sessions as well, where you end up with, you know, probably 8 or 9 centres of excellence. And those ones work really closely with Capita Sims to deliver the support, you know. So ultimately, Sims never really, or whoever buys Sims never has really a, you know, X number of schools to them. So, you know, they're basically.
I think they're going to have a lot of work on their hands to get the software right. So why do you need to worry about the support and the answering the phones when there's plenty of companies out there that can do that, and you're not going to lose margin because the overheads of support are quite high.
Yeah. No, I agree. And then you can focus on just those few centres of excellence, you know, by supporting them, by, you know, there's, you know, any sort of customer service people can come out to you guys rather instead and basically support you guys. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I say, sorry, I definitely led the jury on that one rather than, you would not turn around and say, no, we don't want those schools, would you?
Oh, no.
Dear. How would you make it more competitive, the market as it currently stands?
So I think we talked about standards. I think the standards and accreditation need to be reviewed. Why are the government not involved with this? You know, it's very strange that they've never really. They're doing a lot with finance in terms of chart of accounts and trying to standardise that and talking to the big finance company providers, but I don't believe they've done that with MIS before, to my knowledge, in terms of this is how we want these things done. Probably because they don't know, but I'm very much in terms of raising standards around accreditations for support companies to have things in place, like certain number of trained people that have got accreditation in certain modules as well. So you have a behaviour expert, an assessment expert, them sort of things, because then you can get real value from that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I know that, like in Wales, that there's thinking anyway of having a sort of central sort of almost framework. So that they will basically say, you know, for behaviour management company, here's our criteria, what we expect. Come in and basically, if you want to be a company that's, you know, that we recommend. I know the G Cloud was supposed to be something similar to that, but I don't think it really, like you said, it doesn't necessarily say these people are, you know, it doesn't accredit them. It basically just says, yes, they're on the framework. Here's the pricing. It's, you know, it's just like an open shop, really.
Yes, as I say, anyone could start a company tomorrow and start providing MIS support to schools. As long as they're DBS cleared, they're on the same level as we are. And we've been doing it for 17, 20 years. So that's the market as it stands at the moment.
And do you see more coming in?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I think there will be. I think as the market sort of fragments a little bit and certain more academy chains are up there, I think, and the more commercial academies become, I think that more companies will look at an education arm to their business to be able to provide services and maybe software as well, because I think there's more commercial people coming into education and they'll bring contacts with them and their networks with them as well, as we're probably all aware of as well. That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
No, competition is good. It drives innovation, you hope,
yes.
Anyway.
We have to keep on our toes.
We do. We do have to keep on our toes. So who do you think is your biggest competitor? Who worries you the most when you're asleep?
I've got to say, you know, we do finance and we've got competitors around finance, we've got competitors around MIS, we've got competitors around IT, and we've got competitors around budget planning. And we only really ever lock horns on budget planning with a couple of companies. So MIS really, there's companies that you know out there. I mean, I only consider the privately owned companies in MIS to be our competitors.
Okay.
And they're our friends as well. You know, they're our colleagues, and there's no unsavoury sort of conversations. I mean, Steve Hutton at Schools ICT, he's a good lad. Love what they do. Respect what they do. And yes, we will win some, and they will win some. But on it, there's not many others, I would say. On budget planning, I could name all our competitors on that, but this is an MIS conversation.
Not just necessarily. So ultimately you think you deliver more wider services than everybody else?
I always respect the competition. I've never really worried about them. I need to know that we're as good as them, if not slightly better. Our values are around customer service, value for money, and they're the two things that drive us and our people. If someone's got better software, we will try and do something to match it or be better. But we believe our services are as good as they can be, and you have to constantly evolve your services.
Yeah.
So, and Viv and her team on MIS, there's three accreditations. There could be a fourth in the future. They know what their customers need. They understand, and you know, they are reluctantly, you know, looking at a fourth MIS that we might want to get them accredited on in the future. But it's good. It keeps them on their toes, and it keeps us moving forward.
So if you're going to predict in 3 or 4 years' time or 5 years' time, where do you see SBS? You know, where do you see yourselves? Do you see yourselves being more central to the purchasing process? Do you see yourself delivering far more managed services?
Yeah, I'd hope that our people are doing a lot less travelling. I hope that the technology is embraced more healthily in schools, and we can do things like this. I mean, it's taken this pandemic to have conversations with schools regularly over Teams and Google and things like that, which is great. And I think that will stay. I think that's here to stay. So I want my people to be doing less travelling. I want them to be doing things much more remotely based, and that does lead to remote services and managed services. But we can do consultancy remotely as well. We can do lots of things remotely. And I think we would like to be very much a professional services company that is known for taking the strain from groups of schools and individual schools from processing, daily processing. That's our. If you ask me, would we want to be known as something, that would be great, because I think that's valuable all round.
Yeah. No, I agree. So you don't ever see yourself going in and starting yourself in a multi-academy trust?
Oh, we looked at that, and then they said you can't make a profit, so I immediately lost interest. Yeah, there's too many conflicts of interest. It would be really interesting. The closest we got was in Dubai, where we were going to manage schools out there, and that would have been really fascinating, because obviously there's hardly any regulation out there, so you can manage a school and you can do it in your own way. You can get the head teacher you want, you can bring the education you want, and that was something that we were looking at doing.